We kind of didn't want to say if we did go down the Airbnb or like short-term stays, we didn't want to be like in on it. We just wanted like property managers and all that to look after it. So
They'll do it, but if you want to make sure your investment is done well, then you want to be proactive because they're not always going to be, and you want to constantly poke them and see who they're catering to and how they're advertising and how much they're advertising it for rent at. And it's not if it's short-term stay, it's not going to be hands off. If it's monthly stay, potentially yes, because then
yeah,
somebody again will be renting it for like 4 to 8 months is the average usually at a time. And that's somewhere, I guess, in between in the term of mental bandwidth that you need between short-term stay and just straight out long-term leasing. Hi there, folks, and welcome back to Nippon Trading International's Japan Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Ziv Nakajima again, and this podcast is brought to you, among others, by Emil Gorgies of realestate.jp. He's a Tokyo real estate agent who specializes in serving international or mixed nationality families who are looking for the perfect family home. So Emil's an Australian. He's been living here in Japan for over 2 decades now, and for about half of that time he's been buying, selling, and managing real estate properties in Tokyo on behalf of his own family and a great many happy clients. And he also acts as a mortgage broker on behalf of his clients. So he's got dedicated loan officers in many of the Japanese mega banks. And if you're a regular listener of the podcast, you probably already know him from our JREP, the Japan Real Estate Experts Panel sessions, which means that you're already aware of the fact that the man is an absolute fountain of wisdom on all things related to real estate in Japan, and in particular to family homes, the greater Tokyo metropolitan area, and mortgages. And most importantly, he's incredibly generous with his time and advice, which he's more than happy to provide at no cost or commitment to anyone asking. So if you've been thinking about buying your home in Tokyo, but you've been sitting on the fence for a while, or you just want to have a chat in English with a real expert, drop him a line on sales@realestate.jp. Hit him up today and start exploring your options. All right, so for today's episode, this is a conversation that I've had recently with a young Australian couple, and they're in the market for their first holiday home purchase here in Japan. They were focusing mainly on Kyoto and Osaka, but they're also open to considering other locations. And one of the main criteria for them was the potential to rent out their home when they're not there using it themselves. So we naturally focused mainly on the topic of short or medium term monthly rentals. What's involved in each of those rental schemes? What are the implications of renting out the property in this way or the other? And what would be feasible with a house as opposed to a condo unit? They also wanted to know whether these properties make for good investments overall, and if not, what would be the best profile for a strictly investment property. We also talked a lot about property management and property managers. How much does management and maintenance cost on a regular basis? What expenses are due when tenants change over? And what locations in Japan are best to find affordable, rentable properties in that would appeal not only to domestic guests, but also to international tourists? Then we talked a bit about structural inspections and what we should be looking out for when conducting those inspections on some of the older wooden houses under consideration. And we also focused specifically on the Kyoto and Osaka style of townhouses or properties that are either physically adjoined or just very adjacent to other neighboring properties. What are the implications of purchasing one of those or other properties that are, for another reason, not rebuildable? And what does non-rebuildable actually mean from a practical perspective? And finally, we touch a bit on insurance policies, what types are available in Japan, what kind of coverage should buyers go for. So nice little conversation, mainly on the topic of short and medium-term rental potential for holiday homes, which is a topic that many of you are wondering about and asking us about on a regular basis. So hopefully some useful info in there for you. Enjoy the conversation, and I'll see you again on the other side. Kick that off. Awesome. So let me just browse through your initial email because I've got no memory aside from electronic memory. Give me a sec.
that's okay.
So you're from Perth, you visit Vietnam, you want to purchase a property and talking about areas and property that you can use for short-term stays, Osaka, Kyoto, and you're visiting in the end of September. And then the other question was family members worried about legal and regulatory side and building structure. Okay, so a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
I guess the first thing to address would be the renting out while you're not using it bit. I'm assuming that's what you're referring to, right? Not straight out investment property, but a holiday home that you'll be renting out when you're not using.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Kyoto is very, very challenging for that. Monthly stays are always easier because they just fall under normal rentals legally. So you can always rent out a property while you're not using it. But monthly stays mean some people, especially in Japan, will be renting a property out for 6, 8, even 12 months at a time, and occasionally even longer than that. So that might mean if you're renting out by the month, it might mean that the property is not available when you want to use it, right? So
Yeah.
you can specify in advance, bulk bits where you want to make sure it's not available for others to rent. But then, depending on what season and how frequently you'll be doing that, the property management company might not feel it's profitable enough for them. Like, for example, if you're always coming in sakura season or falling leaf season, then there's not really much in it for them to rent it out the rest of the year. So
Yeah.
requires a bit more strategizing, but actual short-term stays like Airbnb, Booking.com, and so forth, Kyoto would be near impossible. There's way too many of them, and the local municipality is super strict there. Osaka is
Yeah.
totally different. Osaka is actually a designated special short-term stay area, and they're a lot more lenient. So if that is a concern, unless you're laser focused on Kyoto, I'd probably aim for Osaka.
Yeah, Jake was thinking more Osaka.
Yeah.
I was thinking more Kyoto, but yeah, I was also a little bit more, I suppose, concerned now because there's more restrictions in place in Kyoto. So
Kyoto people don't like foreigners that much in recent years. There's too many of us down there.
yeah, yeah. But we are open to like other areas. So that's something else we wanted to kind of maybe ask you is like smaller areas that you think are great to invest in, because obviously these are bigger cities that people visit. What are some smaller areas that I suppose you would recommend?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't classify what you're doing as an investment. It's more a case of you might be able to cover maintenance cost while you're not using the property, because you're talking about a house, right? Not a condo unit?
Yeah, we're more leaning towards a house.
Okay, so houses in Japan are not really built to last. They're not built from very durable materials, which means that depending on your budget, but unless you've got millions of dollars, you're probably going to be buying, especially in the bigger cities, something that's, let's say, at least 30 years old.
Yeah, that's kind
And
of what we've been looking at. So we've been
okay,
on Sumo and
but what is your budget, by the way, roughly?
well, that's what we're kind of still looking at. At the moment, it's varies.
Inclusive of taxes and fees and minor renovations, hopefully we're about 8 million yen.
Okay, so that's definitely going to be something that's, depending on location, either 30 years plus or 40 years plus. And at that age, especially as you get closer to the 40-year mark, they come with very unstable, fluctuating kind of maintenance and repair expenses. So we like to say on average, it creeps up from about 30 years, it starts creeping up, and maybe expect somewhere between $2,000 to $4,000 a year, Australian on average, and it comes and goes. Like you'll have 5, 6 years where everything's okay, and then the roof goes, which is like 20, 30,000. So roughly $2,000 to $4,000 a year in annual average maintenance and repairs. And because of Japan's population being what it is, it's a lot easier to find guests for slightly smaller properties than it is a house. Like, yes, family sized, but maybe more like 40, 50 square meters, not like 100, 120, like the typical Japanese home, because that requires a
Yeah,
large group that wants to rent the place out, or a very affluent family that's a bit smaller. So I would expect that at best you would be covering your costs, maybe a little bit of extra pocket money for the trip kind of thing, but don't treat this as an investment. If you want an investment, If you want to do short-term stay investment, then you have to be very hands-on, buy in a better location, beautifully renovate the place, have a management company that's constantly got their finger on the pulse and constantly looking for people to populate. What you're looking at is more of a, I'm assuming you're visiting like 2-3 months a year, not more than that, right?
Yeah, because we're going to kind of go in together with others in our family. So we're planning on going in with maybe 3 or 4 people. So it just depends, I suppose, when, yeah, we would just obviously slot in when there's free time, I suppose.
Definitely don't think about this as a profit driver or income driver or anything like that. It's more a case of, can I cover my property tax and the maintenance and repairs and maybe have a little bit left over if I'm lucky, kind of thing.
What budget will we be looking at for like investment more so?
Well, if you're really looking for an investment, I would advise to not think about it as the place you'll be holidaying in, because then you want to maximize profits. And, if it happens to be occupied when you want to use it, then, use that money for accommodation yourselves rather than hamper the population, the populating of the property. So I don't know. I mean, depends on how hands-on you want to be. If you are okay constantly working with the property manager to tweak the price that you're asking for, checking vacancy rates, occupancy rates, what the competition is doing, what kind of features, catering to a specific niche market of guests, then it can be profitable. But that's not a full-time job, but it's very hands-on. The other option, if you want a strictly investment, like semi-passive investment property, then just buy something and lease it out long-term. The returns are lower, but I mean, probably purchase price would be lower as well. So you could get a few of those, maybe a couple of those for that same budget, and they'll make you something like 4 to 6% before tax. With short-term stays, you can, if it's run really, really well, like a smooth, well-oiled machine, then you could maybe potentially double that, but it's very hands-on.
Yeah, because we kind of didn't want to say if we did go down the Airbnb or like short-term stays, we didn't want to be like in on it. We just wanted like property managers and all that to look after it. So
they'll do it, but if you want to make sure your investment is done well, then you want to be proactive, because they're not always going to be, and you want to constantly poke them and see who they're catering to and how they're advertising and how much they're advertising it for rent at. And it's not, if it's short-term stay, it's not going to be hands off. If it's monthly stay, potentially yes, because then somebody again will be renting it for like 4 to 8 months is the average usually at a time. And that's somewhere, I guess, in between in the term of mental bandwidth that you need between short-term stay and just straight out long-term leasing. Now, here's some big news for anyone interested in Akia, the abandoned vacant homes that are abundant all around Japan for very attractive purchase prices. Akia Mart, our latest sponsor, is a recently founded online search and discovery tool for Japanese real estate. Its user interface will be very familiar to users of Zillow or Redfin. The platform essentially scouts the internet for property listings, translates them into English, and displays prices in US dollars, all in one place and with a dynamic map interface that makes browsing, finding, and shortlisting your favorite properties a piece of cake. Which any of you who have been struggling with the dozens, if not hundreds, of Japanese property websites that are available online and their very clunky interface will probably find a real blessing. They've got already over 500,000 listings on the platform, and the database is expanding daily. Ranging from abandoned rural homes to luxury urban properties, Akia Mart makes it easy to find your dream home in Japan, regardless of your budget. Now, while the platform is essentially free for use, here's an exclusive offer for listeners of the podcast. You can use the promo code NTI to receive $5 off Akia Mart Pro. The subscription will unlock a bunch of very attractive features for you, including unrestricted access to the entire nationwide property database and a whole range of filters, which will help power-charge your search for that elusive perfect home and make it even easier. So hop over to akia-mart.com, that's AKIYA-MART, akia-mart.com, and kick off your search today.
What are most people doing in Japan to like kind of push people to the property? The property management, do they do any kind of like marketing or anything, or is it just how do they go about getting people into the property? Is it just price right at the right time, or
They do, but it varies depending on season and location and how internationally savvy they are. So, if you're talking about Kyoto and Osaka, for example, a lot of the property managers would be catering to foreign guests specifically. But if you're talking about other locations where there's not that many companies who have bilingual or trilingual staff, then often they'll just be advertising on the normal Japanese channels, which are not bad, but it's kind of, giving up half of your market or so. So it really varies by location. I'd say super popular tourist hotspots like Tokyo, Osaka, Sapporo to a certain degree would have more appeal to international savvy property managers to work that market. Other locations, yeah, so.
gotcha.
Okay.
But I
What
mean,
else have we got?
they do advertise and market, and they'll put the property on all the platforms that it should be on. It's more a case of how, again, proactive they're going to be in tweaking and finding out if the competition is doing something better and adjusting and constantly monitoring the price and making sure they're attractive to guests. I mean, I wouldn't leave it 100% in their hands. You would want to be involved and see what they're doing and how. And then, like, half of our work relates to when a property manager doesn't do that well, to give them some warnings and push them into action. And eventually, if they're not doing well constantly, then replace them with another one. So managing the property managers is involved. It's not a set and forget kind of thing.
Yeah, gotcha.
For short-term stays, again, long-term leases are just, they'll let you know when a tenant's moving out, you do a bit of a renovation and put the next one in.
Yeah. Okay.
We've kind of got a bunch of questions regarding like costs and budgeting. So we've gone through Airbnb and management fees. What services do they actually kind of cover? Like,
The property managers? Everything. So for short-term stay, they have to be, again, very involved. So they do the marketing, the advertising, the pricing, the bookings, check-ins, check-outs. They take care of the cleaning. Maintenance and repairs varies by company. So some of them will also do it themselves. Some of them will just let you know and maybe provide a quote, and then you'll want to get maybe a second opinion. Again, a lot of our job is to check on estimates that they provide from their affiliated repair and renovation professionals, seeing if it's in line with what we've paid in the past in similar cases, and potentially bringing in another maintenance company to do the job if it's not. And we wouldn't replace them just because of that, because if they're good at getting guests and getting the income going, then we're not going to hold it against them that they're a bit pricey on the maintenance. We'll just bring another maintenance company in. And then they will charge you, they vary, but generally speaking, it's between 20 to 30% of the gross income. And some of them calculate that with the fees that are paid for cleaning and utilities and internet and deposit, and some of them calculate it just based on the actual room price. It varies, but generally you can expect between 20 to 30%. Long-term property managers will only charge about 5% plus tax, but they'll also charge a placement fee when they're placing a new tenant, which is equal to somewhere between 1 to 3 months the gross rent.
gotcha.
Okay.
I mean, they actually only charge 1 month, but depending on the season and how easy it is to repopulate, they would suggest other things to pay for. So, for example, they'll share the listing with other property managers to try and get them to bring, and then they need to get 1 month as well. Or they'll offer first month free rent, or the owner participation in move-in fees, which could be equivalent to about 1 month. So normally between 1 to 3 months of rent is what it's going to cost you when a tenant leaves, plus whatever you need to do to renovate and repair, which would depend on the length of the tenancy.
Yeah.
And with like repairs, obviously different climate in Japan rather than Australia. You got like the chance of mold. Obviously, it's wood beams in the building and whatnot, so structural. Do they go through a whole kind of like property condition kind of report while they're monitoring the
Well, even
house?
when, like, say over here in Perth, when we purchased a house, there'll be like pest inspection, building inspection. all of that. Does that happen over in Japan? Like, could you get a pest inspection or?
It doesn't have to happen, but we definitely advise it if you're buying anything that's over 30 years old. In the case of the house, condo units are a different story. But in the case of the house, if it's over 30 years old, we definitely get a structural inspection. If that inspection reveals, among other things, termite tracks, then we would also definitely advise to bring a pest control unit in. But to be honest with you, if we see evidence in the inspection report of, so there are some major issues like potential water leaks, which means a section or the entire roof needs to be replaced, tilting and sinking, which indicates foundational issues or land liquefaction, and termite tracks, which is very difficult to determine how deeply they got into the walls or the floorings. All we see is the entry points, right? So if we see any of those three major issues, we would normally not advise to go ahead with the purchase. But if you are, again, if you're really emotionally attached or laser focused on that particular property, then we could bring in pest control. I mean, really what the pest control units will do is they will fumigate and make sure that there is no more infestation, but they can't dig into the foundations and tell you how deep the termites got. That's always going to be a bit of a question mark. So we're wary of that.
How long does that kind of take in that process? Is it like a week to get these people out to check, or is it within the day, or what's the process time?
The way we'd normally do it is we'd submit an offer, and on the offer, we'd note that it's pending a structural inspection report. And then once the seller accepts your offer, because we don't want to pay for the inspection if they don't, then we'll schedule the inspection, which takes about 2 weeks to schedule, and then another week for us to get the report afterwards. So it adds between 2 to 4 weeks to the purchase process. If it would normally take about 2 months, it could take up to 3 months with the inspection.
Yeah, right. Okay. That's good to know.
One thing that we've said Osaka and Kyoto, more so because we kind of narrowed it. Obviously, they're really high tourist spots. So we're thinking as an Airbnb, it would tick over quite well. But at the same time, kind of narrowed down to it because there's smaller chance of earthquakes, not close to coastline, tsunamis. There's no major radiation plants around. And I think there was one more thing that active volcanoes.
Earthquakes? Good luck avoiding earthquakes in Japan. I mean, they're very unpredictable. They could happen anywhere. I mean, there are some places where they haven't happened for the last decade or so, but that means nothing as to whether they'll happen. I mean, there are some areas that are extremely earthquake prone, but the rest of the country can definitely have it too.
Yeah.
We watched the video or something, and this guy had kind of mapped out the whole of Japan, and he put all these action points around. There was this little kind of circle which narrowed down.
Stephen Huang, good guy, I know him. Yeah.
So we followed that advice a little bit. But if we were to look at Osaka and Kyoto with our budget, would you suggest anywhere else? I think we kind of think Tokyo would be way out of budget.
Yeah.
Tokyo would be way out of budget, but the areas around Tokyo might fit. So I'm thinking suburban Yokohama, Saitama City, which is about even closer to Tokyo, about 30 minutes from Tokyo. It's a smaller town, smaller city than Yokohama, but it's very close to Tokyo. Chiba City, towards Narita Airport there. Those might be within your budget, I think, potentially. Kobe City, which is about an hour, 45 minutes from Osaka.
Yeah, we kind of looked around there too.
Nara City, which, I mean, it's a beautiful place, but I find it a bit boring. Once you've seen the deer park, you've seen most of it. And Fukuoka City, where we live, which is, I would recommend hands down, but it's not as commutable from major airports. Our airport here only flies, I think, to Europe and Asia, not to the USA and Canada and Australia, which is where a lot of your guests would come from. Now, if you've attended any of our recent JREP Summit events in Tokyo, you've probably heard our sponsor, Robert Miller from Innovatious.com. He's been in web solutions here in Japan for the past 25 years, and he's also an active investor in Japanese real estate property, as well as global online property, which is his specialty and what his company Innovatious is all about. They offer a full suite of website services for entrepreneurs and small business owners, including all aspects of web design and management, backup and updates, content formatting and editing, proactive maintenance and error fixing, you name it, with a strong focus on SEO excellence, which is what gets you those hardcore, top of the list search engine rankings. But there is a difference. Innovations works off a simple, all-inclusive monthly subscription model, as opposed to the typical outdated and confusing per project model. So you never have to wonder how much any request for any work to be done on your website might cost. It's always $297 per month, period. And if that's not enough, if you mention that you've heard of their services on the Japan Real Estate Podcast, you'll also get 10% off this monthly price for life. Also, and equally important, if not more, you can try out Innovations for just 1 month, then switch them off, on again later if you wish, and so forth. There are no minimum subscription terms. Now, if you're a small business owner, managing and growing a website is super distracting and time-consuming, right? That's exactly where Innovations comes in. Robert's team takes care of all of that for you so that you can focus on what you do best. So feel free to email Rob at robert@innovacious.com. That's INNOVACIOUS.com. And his team will conduct a full SEO and website audit on your site, reveal anything that you should address to lift your website's appeal and visitor numbers, and provide you with an easy-to-read, detailed report with your own branding so that you can make some informed decisions on your online strategy and watch your business grow as you implement it. So once more, robert@innovacious.com. Drop him a line and get your website reviewed today.
Yeah.
But it's Fukuoka City is a bit of a mecca for Southeast Asian travelers, so there's a lot of tourism coming in from there.
Yeah.
We came last time. We did think about Fukuoka, but at the same time, I think if we're going to be using it as a holiday house, more so, we didn't really like it too much. Like, I think it makes sense though. Like I've seen, I think some of your podcasts where they say it's a good spot and it has potential in the future more so.
That must have been a very early podcast because now it's gone through the roof. It's actually rising as fast as Tokyo and Osaka.
Oh, well.
Yeah,
we're talking about Fukuoka City, right?
We've been scrolling constantly and listening when we can. So.
Now, when we started doing most of the deals we did were in Fukuoka City because we thought it had the potential to be a rising star, and we were very much correct. But those days are long gone, man. Now we find it even a bit too expensive. Like a 7-8 million yen house in Fukuoka City would be very suburban. Very, very suburban and not very attractive to guests.
Yeah. What do you reckon about this place?
We had a few other like less crowded areas. So Kanazawa is one that we quite liked, and it seems like it's a bit more touristy these days.
Yep.
Toyama, Kamakura, Ito.
Kamakura, did you say?
Kamakura, yeah.
That would be difficult to purchase a house, especially close to the tourist spots. That's a very upmarkety area where Tokyo people go to retire.
Yeah, we kind of looked into that. Kanazawa we're like a little bit interested in because we've been there, but it's the whole getting there with the transport, I suppose.
Which kind of threw us off.
Yokohama City itself is pretty good, but aside from that, you're getting into pretty rural territory,
yeah. I suppose that kind of led into like our next questions, like what you thought, like where to invest, popular tourist spots, like hot spots.
Look, the real hot spots are going to be way out of your budget, right?
Yeah.
So if it's a really, really popular internationally location, it's going to be like Tokyo or Niseko or like the heart of Kyoto and Osaka, which is not going to be within your budget. I think the list of places you've mentioned, aside from Kamakura and Toyama, I think are doable. But the other advantage with Osaka specifically is it's a designated, like I mentioned, it's a designated short-term stay area, which means that with a normal short-term stay license, you can only rent it out half the year. In Osaka specifically, you can rent it out throughout the year, 365 days. Chiba City as well.
Okay.
So if Airbnb is really the focus, I would stick to those two cities maybe.
Yeah, okay. We were looking a little bit into is it Minpaku law?
Minpaku, yeah.
So is that saying that it doesn't really affect that area or?
It's It's the other way around. It's that those two areas and a couple of other ones that are less attractive. But Chiba City, Osaka City specifically, the local municipality wants to attract more tourists. So they've designated the way it works is the national government gave out a national framework, and then they allowed each municipality to tweak that to suit their comfort level. Most cities around Japan have made it stricter because they don't want too many foreigners and tourists running around. But Osaka and Chiba City specifically have made it looser because they do want tourists coming in.
And there's always potential for that law to change.
I guess if they get swarmed with tourists, yeah. So, but I mean, they're not going to go below that national framework. I wouldn't think they might make it a bit. They might make it a bit stricter in the sense that you have to be within a certain distance to a public facility like a school or a kindergarten or a nursing home. But I don't see that they'll go anywhere below the 180. Like some of the municipalities, they wanted to go below 180, couldn't do that officially. But what they did is said, okay, well, you can only rent it out on the weekends and public holidays, for example. So, I mean, that would be the worst, I think, that they would do. But I don't see that happening, to be honest with you. Osaka and Chiba City are not exactly, I mean, Osaka is popular, but it's not like they mind the tourists. It's one of the biggest cities in Japan. They've got a lot of tourists. They're not as traditional, stuck in their ways like Kyoto people are. I don't see that they'll want to reverse that. But yeah, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, to be honest, so no idea.
Our next question on that, I'll jump to this one here. So we're coming in September, more so the last 3 times we've come has just kind of been holiday, explore, find places that we like. But this time we're trying to narrow down on where we want to go. So I think it's more leaning towards Osaka now that you've mentioned that. What would you suggest our process should be when we kind of land? Do we get in touch with, local real estate agents, or is there someone that we can get in touch with that can kind of show us, I don't know, an example property?
Yeah, so Osaka specifically, we haven't worked. So basically, foreigner-friendly agents in Japan are pretty rare. Bigger international hubs like Tokyo, Osaka would have, like Tokyo, for example, there's maybe a dozen that I can think of. Osaka has maybe a handful. Other locations, maybe 1, 2, 3 at most. So you can definitely reach out to those who are advertising in English, and I'm sure they'll be able to research and show you some properties. Just make sure before you get in touch with them if they can actually handle a purchase on behalf of a non-resident foreigner, because some of them, even though they've got English-speaking staff, still would not be able to do that, in which case you'll need to bring somebody like us. I mean, it's good to bring us in, at least on a consulting basis, just so that we're having the kind of conversations we're having with you now, because the realtors are not going to do that. You point them at the property and they'll help you buy it. That's it. So having some... Sorry, go ahead.
Someone from like you can then go on and discuss and talk with the agents.
Yeah, so what we normally do, we come in 2 types of capacities. Either we do everything on your behalf, and that's at a fixed price based on the percentage of the property price. And then we'll just give you like bottom line decisions to make, and we'll handle all of the paperwork and everything on your behalf and make sure that you're not making any costly mistakes. Or we can just hold your hand along the way while you're working with a foreigner-friendly realtor. And in that case, what we'll want to do is set up a chat group like Line or WhatsApp or one of those, and have you and us and the agent in the group together discussing potential properties, guiding them in what questions to ask in due diligence, reviewing documents before you sign them. Because if they're foreigner friendly, they'll be able to service you in English. The documents will be in English, but again, they're not going to raise red flags or tell you what questions to ask. So it's better to have somebody in the process.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Another thing that we were looking at, obviously Japan's very dense, so we were looking at properties that are single story, which we've found quite an issue. It's tricky. Quite hard to find on Sumo.
Because land is of a premium, yeah.
What would you suggest if we were to find a single story or a multi-story property? Is there like a better preference? In our head, we kind of think that, if there's a leak in the roof or something and it's 3 stories, potential for that to just keep going down the levels, or structural.
Not really. Structural and repair wise, there's not really a huge difference. We've got clients with both. I haven't seen any major repair or maintenance issues that are different. It's more a case of convenience. We also, especially our elderly clients, and I don't know if who's going to be using the property on your end, but stairs can be very steep in Japan, especially in these narrow houses types. So it's more a convenience thing than anything else, I think.
Yeah.
And with that as well.
Sorry. For short-term stay licensing, you would need to make sure, I think if it's 3 floors, there need to be fire safety doors. I'm not sure. But with short-term stay licensing, by the way, we haven't even touched on that, but if that's definitely going to be something that you'll want, is to have a short-term stay license. There's a bit of research required before you actually start looking at potential properties, to look into local municipality regulations, see what they stipulate, and then search for the properties that would suit that. Because again, for example, if it says not within 500 meters to a school, you want to know that before you actually pull the trigger and buy a property that is, because there's no amount of renovations that'll fix that, right? So I can put you in touch with a short-term stay management company that also does research, and they do service people in English. They'll be able to, if you give them a list of locations, make it prioritized, because they charge per municipality that they research. And then for, I think, 20,000 yen per municipality, they let you know what the regulations are and how easy it's going to be to get a license. And then once you have potential properties for 10,000 yen per property, they let you know if that property is likely to comply, and if not, what would be required to make it comply.
Okay.
I wouldn't submit offers. If short-term stay is definitely one of the goals, I wouldn't submit any offers and enter any purchase process with a seller before you find out.
Yeah, we don't really take that.
Yeah, no, we didn't know that.
Because in Japan, by the way, so the offers here are not legally binding. You don't need to put any money down when you're making an offer. But if you submit an offer and then just change your mind and pull it back, that agent will never work with you again. It's just not done here. So you want to get all your ducks in a row before you actually enter the process with them.
Yeah. Okay.
And we went up with the multi-story properties, but one thing we have noticed is some of them have like more so connected roofs and connected walls on some of the properties.
Yes.
Is that a major issue, or?
It's a legislative and logistics issue. So what it means is that, number one, that property cannot be rebuilt in the future. There are other properties that can be rebuilt in the future as well, but that's definitely one of them, which means that so essentially, as long as you leave the foundation and the supporting wall or two intact, then you can do anything you want with the property and just call it a renovation. It's not going to be a rebuild legally. So that's not an issue. But again, severe earthquake, foundation gets totally smashed, then you're not going to be able to rebuild anything on that lot. The other thing is that any renovation and repairs you want to do could involve getting agreement from the neighbors that you have adjoining bits of the property with, and potentially extra expenses, because when you do your work, you'll be damaging some of theirs as well, and you'll need to repair that afterwards. Yeah. And lastly, banks will not lend for non-rebuildable properties. That means that if and when you want to resell down the track, you'll be limited to cash buyers.
Yeah. Okay.
You'll run across a lot of them, especially in Kyoto and Osaka, where it's very dense again. Current zoning regulations often don't allow for a property to be rebuilt on that same tiny land plot. So it's not a caveat that you need to avoid these properties at all costs, but just be aware of what's involved, because there's going to be a lot of them in Japan. The zoning regulations these days require a 4-meter wide access road for emergency vehicles, certain distance from the properties, certain ratio of structure to land plot that these old 30, 40, 50-year-old properties just didn't need to live up to when they were built. So it's often going to be the case that they're going to be non-rebuildable.
We interrupt this broadcast to tell you about Tokyo Family Stays. They're a short-term rentals company in Tokyo, and they offer a home away from home experience, which is just perfect for remote working, quarantining, if that's still a thing, or if you just need somewhere quiet to get away from the world. They offer a variety of options for families, corporate relocations, or even if you're simply transitioning between homes in Tokyo. The properties are super comfortable, tastefully furnished, fully equipped with all amenities, and they accommodate up to 10 people. So really the only thing you'll need to bring with you is your toothbrush and maybe a change of clothes. They come with fast unlimited wireless internet, dedicated workspaces, and fully equipped kitchens, and they're just a delight to stay in. Fantastic alternative to Japanese business hotels, which if you've ever stayed in one, you probably know they're tiny, they're noisy, fine for a night or two if you're on your own, but longer term or with a family, you'll probably feel you're in a jail cell very quickly in a Japanese business hotel. So if you want to give yourself a sense of space and freedom by renting a real home with comfortable Western beds, including all the necessities like baby bedding, children's toys, high chairs, etc., you definitely want to reach out to Tokyo Family Stays. They've been at it for over a decade. They're a fully licensed minpaku or short-term stay operator. And as a special bonus for our viewers and listeners, they're also throwing in a breakfast basket upon arrival for anyone who books and mentions the Japan Real Estate Podcast or NTI. And not only for guests, if you're a property owner, you've got an investment property that you want to tweak for higher profit, or a holiday home that you want to rent out when you're not using it via short-term stays, drop them a line today, see how they can help you maximize your property's income. And again, as a special bonus to our viewers and listeners, they're also offering a free audit of your existing short-term stay listings without any obligation whatsoever. So feel free to reach out to them at tokyofamilystays.com. Well worth a visit. And again, if you're in the market for a family home in or around the Tokyo metropolitan area, Emil's your man. Don't be shy to reach out to him as well at sales@realestate.jp. And now, back to the podcast.
What's you said about having like different gaps for emergencies and whatnot. One thing we did notice is some of the property had like a bit of courtyard out the front, like a gate, and it has a small kind of area. How would we go about extending a roof on there? Is that kind of allowed outwards? So I'm thinking,
so like a portico, not a portico, like a I suppose like a patio.
Yeah, like patio.
Yeah. So building regulations are kind of lax in Japan in the sense that unless you're doing something very outlandish, it's never going to be an issue. You're not going to have anyone come and complain that you built any illegal extensions. But if it doesn't fall within construction requirements for that type of property, you might not be able to officially register the extension. In which case, again, a bank will not lend for it down the track because it's not properly registered. You'll be limited to cash buyers again. But essentially, that's not if you're trying to extend the house by the same amount of floor plan again, that's going to be an issue. But if you're just adding little extensions, like a loft or a balcony or a patio, that's usually not going to be an issue.
Yeah, right.
Cool. What else about?
No.
When we go into Airbnb, what kind of like insurances do we need to worry about? Like anything revolving around public liability, and obviously property insurance as well. How do we go about doing that?
Any property that's going to be tenanted, you'll want to get landlord insurance for. And you'll always want to get structural insurance for fire, earthquake, damages by typhoons, that kind of thing. You'll always want to get regardless of whether it's tenanted or not. But that's pretty cheap in Japan. You're talking about something like $2,000-3,000 for a 5-year policy.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And the landlord insurance is equally ridiculous. That's like 6,000 or 7,000 yen a year, so less than $100 a year. And that will cover damages to even up to a case of a death in the property. So that takes obviously more renovations and repairs if anything like that happens, and the insurance will cover most of that.
In terms of property management and house cleaning costs, how much is it roughly for like a cleaner to come in and clean it after each stay? And then what's their kind of frequency? Is there a restriction on, I don't know, if we do a 90-day kind of property rent out, for how often do they come?
So if you're doing monthly stays, which is usually Airbnb, people are usually not going to book a property for more than a month. So if you're going to do a monthly stay, it doesn't fall under the minpaku legislation. So then it's up to you if you want to clean the property and how much. With a normal rental, renovation, repair, cleaning between tenants is entirely up to the landlord. No one's going to force you. You only do it to the level of which will enable you to get the next tenant. With short-term stay, there's, again, each ward office will have their own municipal regulations on what sort of cleaning and hygiene and check-in, check-out procedures are required between guests. So it's a bit hard to say in advance, but you'll always need to get cleaners in there between guests. Visit from a cleaners, depending on how thorough it needs to be, is usually something like 5 to 10,000 yen, depending on the size of the property, maybe a little bit more if it's bigger.
Yeah.
But each property, short-term stay property manager will have their own procedure on that. I would work with them rather than try to estimate all of that yourselves.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Run through.
Yeah, I've got to go get a book. So.
Yeah. We're also wondering, because we're still trying to narrow down on this process, is there some kind of like checklist or kind of playbook for buying investment property?
A short-term stay property?
Yes, sorry.
I don't have anything official, but what we've discussed. So first research the municipality, see what the regulations are, then start looking for potential properties that suit within that framework of the local municipality's regulations. And then when you actually get a short list, get the short-term stay management company to review that and tell you if they think it would qualify for the license or not. And then once you've purchased, you go ahead and apply for the license, which is a bit of a lengthy, painful procedure, but eventually, hopefully, you'll get there.
And finding those kind of short-term stay property managers, how do you think we should kind of streamline that? Obviously, we can work with yourself, but doing some research in the background as well. Is there anything that we should look out for that could be like a major red flag for some of these companies online?
It's hard to say. I mean, we normally work with the ones that we used to working with, so we can vet them, and we've, hopefully worked with them before at least once or twice. Otherwise, I mean, it's not like they've got the title deed and can do anything dodgy with the property. So what do you mean by red flags?
Oh, just anything that we should kind of keep our eye out of. Obviously, we kind of have noticed that there's different ways of doing things over there, and we kind of want to narrow down on doing the right thing by the property manager and whatnot. But obviously, they may do certain things different to Australia.
We usually judge them by how efficient they've been at constantly populating the property and transferring the income on time. That's nothing that you'll be able to know in advance. So you start working with them. If they don't do a good job, you replace them. I mean, there's not much that I can say beyond that. But same goes for a long-term lease or any other property manager, right? Or for renovation companies. We give them a chance. They do a project. They're not good. We replace them. There's nothing that could go horribly wrong here except a bit of a loss of income. It's not like Japan. That was actually one of the questions towards the end of your email. Japan is as legal and regulated as anywhere in the world can be. There's a paper trail to the moon and back for everything that you do here with any service provider. There's very little monkey business or dodginess happening here. I mean, there could be better or worse professionals in the sense that they'll get better results or not, but they're not going to be scammy or dodgy.
I think that's what we're also thinking. Like, what is the worst case scenario? What's the worst thing that could happen in this whole process?
Earthquake, house comes crashing down and you can never rebuild it. So you collect your insurance money and walk away.
Yeah.
Jeez, I want that.
Yeah.
Hoping that you're not in the property at the time. Yeah, that would be the worst case scenario.
Yeah, true. So like going back to like the purchasing of a property, and going through like what you would have to pay on top of just the purchase of the house. Like,
yep.
We've kind of listed out a few things being like the sales tax, stamp duty, like city planning tax, agent commission, registry license tax.
Yeah, you can at your budget level. I'll make it simpler for you. At your budget level, putting ourselves aside for a moment, because again, we can work in either a consulting way, which is cheap, or fixed price, which is a bit pricier. But putting us aside for a moment, you can expect up to about 15% in total purchase costs. Hopefully, a bit less than that, and that will go towards the realtor fee, the purchase tax, and the legal and registration fees of the ownership transfer itself.
Okay.
And then annually, you're looking at a property tax statement that's Again, at this budget and this type of property, probably up to $500-600 a year. Hopefully a bit less than that, depending on location and how old it is.
Yeah.
Unless you happen to be buying something with a huge garden or backyard, like a really big land plot. But at that price level, and keeping in mind that you want to be accessible to guests so close to a big city, that's not going to be very likely.
No, we haven't really been looking at that.
No.
Yeah.
I think we've really gone through most.
Yeah, I think that's like all the questions kind of we had.
What would you suggest we do from here, knowing obviously some of the questions that we've asked and what we're trying to kind of narrow down on? What do you think our next step should be?
So you're coming in September, you said, right?
Yeah.
I would advise, as a preparation, narrow down the locations that you're interested in, and let me put you in touch with that property manager / research company, just so that they give you a rough idea of how easy or challenging it would be to get a license in each of these locations. And they'll also give you the framework from the local municipalities so that you'll know what kind of properties you should be looking for. And then maybe about a month ahead of your visit, reach out to local agent. Okay, let's put it this way. A month and a half before your visit, try reaching out to local agencies that have English websites and promote their services to foreigners. See if they can, if you're getting good response from them and things seem to be moving along, then work with them on narrowing your shortlist for the visit or properties to look at. And if they're not responsive, then come back to me and I'll put you in touch with an agent who will be a bit more responsive, or we'll take it on ourselves, depending on which way you want to go. Once you have a short list and maybe still a little bit before your visit, float that to the research company again so that they can tell you if those particular properties are likely to get the license or not.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
Awesome. Lots of information.
Yeah. I'm going to have to listen to this one back and really digest it.
We will share the recording with you if you want, let me know. But I've got a backlog of about 4 months, so it'll take me a while to publish it. But if you want access to it before that, let me know.
Yeah, awesome. That'd be great.
Thank
you. Really appreciate that, Ziv.
My pleasure. Good luck.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
See you.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
So there you have it, a nice and deep dive into all things related to renting out your Japanese holiday home when you're not using it yourself. Hope this brought some value to those among you in similar circumstances. Now, before we go, we're also, as always, going to tell you and also link to our other sponsor's website. That's Hiroshi Shimizu, immigration lawyer and administrative scrivener. If you're thinking about moving here on a more permanent basis, or you're already in Japan on some sort of a temporary visa and you want to switch to a longer term or permanent one, or if you're considering setting up a local company or a branch office of a foreign company and you've got any sort of business or visa related inquiries, or even if you just want to find out what your options are on any of these topics, feel free to contact Hiroshi Shimizu. You can find him at japanimmigrationexperts.com. And he can help you set up a company, apply for any kind of visa, or just provide you with the best advice and extremely affordable consultation related to these topics. And he's already done that for many of our listeners. So feel free to reach out to him. Again, that's japanimmigrationexperts.com, and you'll be well on your way. And that's it from us for today, folks. Hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Japan Real Estate Podcast. Do share it with your networks, and please let us know what you think. So leave us a short rating or review on the iTunes Store, on Spotify, or just drop us a line in the comment section or wherever you might have found this episode. We love hearing from you. Hope to have you with us again next time, and until then, have a great day or night ahead. Yoroshiku.